Hey everybody, Craig Hester here with R2AWatches.com. Thank you for joining us as we continue on our journey through all the watches that are available at R2AWatches.com. Been a little while since we did an upload, so if you've been missing us, we appreciate that. If you're watching this on YouTube, be sure and hit like and subscribe. If you're watching this on Facebook, you're going to want to join the closed group Vostok-Europe Timepieces, which is the best way to find out all the news and information that's going on at R2AWatches.com. Don't let the name fool you. We do call it Vostok-Europe Timepieces because that is our flagship brand, but every watch that we carry at R2AWatches.com is talked about and shared on there, and it's the best place to get the latest deals, the latest news. In fact, we do a show every week just for that group. So today we are talking about the Lunokhod 2 from Vostok-Europe. So this is not the first time that we've had the Lunokhod 2 on the show, but today we're talking about two particular models that I happen to personally like. Particularly one of them is a personal favorite of mine, which is the 3i chrono, because it does have the full lume subdials. The Lunokhod 2 is among the flagship watches of Vostok-Europe. You could definitely say that the two pillars at the top of Vostok-Europe are the Energia and the Lunokhod 2. If you are not familiar with Vostok-Europe, it is a boutique brand based in Vilnius, Lithuania. Every watch is 100% designed there and hand-assembled by 7 full-time watchmakers at their facility in Vilnius. Been there many times. In fact, Abe Weiss and I, my Jewish grandmother, who's also my number one guy here at R2AWatches.com. For those of you who aren't familiar, you won't get that joke. For those of you who are familiar, you're probably still laughing. We're going to be going over there to Vilnius next month. So again, want to join that group, Vostok-Europe Timepieces, because we will be doing some live shows on Facebook while we're there at the Vilnius facility next month. And when I say next month, I mean November of 2019 for those of you who may be watching this well after that happens. So the Lunokhod 2, again, at the top level of the Vostok-Europe collection. Today we are talking about two very distinct models, but both of them with the black PVD plating. One of them has the automatic mechanical movement from the NH35 from Seiko, and the other has the, I believe this is the, what is this? This is the 6S30. This is the 6S30 3 because it has the three complex chronograph movement in it from Miyota. So we have one here, we have the hybrid quartz movement, and one we have the automatic mechanical. Those are the two big differences between these two models. Otherwise, they are effectively the same, both coming from the Lunokhod collection of Vostok-Europe. Lunokhod is named after the Lunokhod, well, in this case, the Lunokhod 2, which is named after a lunar rover that the Soviets put on the moon back in the 1970s. It held records for the longest period of time on the moon. We have ghosts now. Longest period of time ever on the moon for a lunar rover. It also was used during the cleanup of the Chernobyl accident because of the fact that these lunar rovers were designed to be hardened against radiation, because there is greater radiation on the moon than there is on Earth, and they were actually quite effective in helping to clean up the radiation at the Chernobyl site. So that's the history of the name. Every Vostok-Europe does have a story and our inspiration, in this case, the Lunokhod 2. This is easily the most complex case that Vostok-Europe makes, especially when you get into the multi-layered dial work that you see here. There are several levels of the dial. The case itself is exceptionally complex, so it is easily the most complex case work that Vostok-Europe produces. In this particular case, you are looking at a professional grade dive watch. That means that it is 200-meter water resistant or higher. In this case, both of them, including the chronograph, which is actually a little bit unusual because of the way they were able to design the pushers on this, they were able to actually lift the water resistance level on both of these to the 300-meter level. So that is 100 meters above what is required to be considered a professional grade dive watch. And of course, you also need that unidirectional rotating bezel to meet that distinction. Let me run through some of the specs on the watch, and then I'm going to get a little deeper into what makes this one just so cool. I'm going to zero out my caliper here, and let's check the width of the case. So you're looking at a solid 49-millimeter case. This is the largest case currently made by Vostok-Europe, 48.8, 49, depending upon where I move around the caliper here, because, of course, you see that the way the bezel is designed, it has these cuts across it, and the designing of it is not perfectly circular. It is specifically shaped differently, so it depends on exactly where you're doing the measurement, but you are talking about basically a 49-millimeter watch, and it is almost 17 millimeters thick. So this is by no means a small watch. And again, in the Vostok-Europe collection, it is the largest that you can get. The only previous larger watch was the Maria, which was a 50 millimeter that Vostok-Europe produced. And they do not have plans actually to produce another 50 millimeter watch. If anything, Vostok-Europe is moving towards having a greater balance between the larger size watches and what would be considered a more traditional size, as much of the market is moving towards traditional size watches. But never fear, those of you who love Vostok-Europe and love larger timepieces, you're not going to see Vostok-Europe suddenly go away completely from the larger timepieces. That is part of their stock and trade, and why people who are big fans of Vostok-Europe like their watches, because they do still build big, aggressive watches that are designed for going to extremes, as their slogan says, and they certainly meet that criteria. So this is the 4212 that you're looking at here. This is one of my personal favorites in the Vostok-Europe collection. I actually have this watch in my own collection, and I do not, by the way, own every Vostok-Europe. I think I would probably not be married very long if that were the case. Certainly there are some of them that I like more than others. That does not mean by any means that you should pick a particular watch because I happen to say that I like it. There is no accounting for taste, as they say. But if it is something that matters to you, I really like this particular execution, and I'm going to tell you why. The main reason is the color scheme and the choice of movements on this. First of all, it is one of the few Vostok-Europes that still has the tri-complex on the chronograph. So let's be clear, we are talking about the 6S30 movement here from Miyota. That makes this a hybrid quartz movement. That means that this movement actually has mechanical parts in it, and it has jewels. This is not just a standard quartz movement. This is a very sophisticated, extremely well made, arguably one of the best made and most sophisticated chronograph quartz movements in the world today. One of the ways that you can really see how that hybrid function, where's my little pointer? Here we go. How that hybrid function works. If you'll see here, when you look at the continuous second hand, which is the bottom of the tri-complex, you'll see that it ticks more in line with what you think of when you think of a quartz watch. Tick, tick, tick. When you activate the chronograph, this movement actually almost sweeps like a mechanical. In fact, I'm going to pick up, make sure the NH35 is running here, automatic mechanical here. Now look at the sweep on the second hand of the automatic, and look at the sweep on the chronograph after it was activated by on the 6S30. And you can see that they're quite similar. It has almost the look and feel of an automatic. And I also like with the tri-complex that you get the split second function on the third eye. And you can see that that stops after 30 seconds. I'm going to reset the chronograph. When I start it again, you can see that the 1/20th of a second split second chronograph starts. So if you really need very fine timekeeping for an event, the 6S30 is an excellent example of that. So some of the other aspects of this, as I mentioned, it does have the unidirectional rotating bezel. That makes it a true dive watch. It does have the Gorilla Glass system. Do I still have I may not have it here. I think I took it upstairs to our other area, but it is a 4 millimeter thick crystal. I don't have it down here, but that's okay. It's a 4 millimeter thick crystal on this watch. Now think about that, 4 millimeters thick. That's thicker than a lot of bracelets. So the crystal on this is just off the hook. And then when you add into the fact that it is the Gorilla Glass system, it really is the perfect combination for what you would want in a crystal for a sport timekeeping, for a sport watch. What does that mean? Well, the Gorilla Glass system, or K1, puts it right between sapphire and mineral on the Mohs scale, the Mohs hardness scale. A sapphire is 9, a regular mineral crystal is 5, the K1 or Gorilla Glass system is a 7. So you have nearly the scratch resistance of sapphire and you have nearly the shatter resistance of mineral, which is really the best combination for a sport timepiece. The other key feature of this watch is the Tritium Tube technology. Now, if you're not familiar with Tritium Tubes, what they are is they are laser sealed glass tubes that have a substance in them called tritium that constantly activates a luminous material that is trapped inside the glass tube with the tritium so that you get constant illumination. It doesn't matter. You can throw this watch in a drawer. A year later, it's going to have the same level of illumination as it did when you first put it in the drawer, as opposed to Superluminova, which any other Vostok-Europe watch that doesn't use tritium is either going to also or exclusively use superluminova. They only use Swiss-made superluminova. None of the other makers out there on the market is Vostok-Europe using. And that you charge up preferably in UV light, and we all know that after a couple, 3 hours, that's going to fade. It's going to be really bright in the beginning, bang, but then it's going to go down pretty quickly. Tritium, while not as bright as superluminova when you first charge it up, does have constant illumination, so you don't have to worry about charging it up, and you don't have to worry about the illumination going away. One of the things that I really love about that is in any low light condition, you don't have to be a sportsman to have the value of tritium. When I travel a great deal, it's great on a plane. I don't have to push a button to light up the watch or bother my neighbor. I can look down. I'm always going to see the time when I'm dealing with tritium, or in a movie or something along those lines where you don't want the light to bother somebody else, but you still want to see your watch. That's one of the great things about tritium. Obviously, that has value in sporting applications, particularly in diving, so that you can make sure that you always see your watch. Now, one of the things that Vostok-Europe has done over the years is they've figured out ways to maximize the illumination of tritium. And the Lunokhod 2 is arguably the most ingenious way that they have approached that. And that's why I've been holding this up. If you can't tell what was in my hand this whole time, this is actually the chapter ring from inside the watch. Okay, where the tritium tubes are actually, we took apart a Lunokhod 2 so we could do this, where the tritium tubes are actually placed. This is a separate, as I mentioned, this is a complex case and a complex dial configuration. The chapter ring on this is actually above the rest of the dial, and you can look here on the Tri-Complex 4212, you've actually got 3 layers. You have the bottom layer where the subdials are for the chronograph, then you have the layer above that, then you have the layer that has the tritium tubes in it. So I'm showing you this because Vostok-Europe developed this really cool system to maximize the illumination. If you look at tritium tubes on most normal watches, that's the wrong terminology, but on what you would, and the most common way that tritium tubes are applied onto a watch is to lay them flat in each of the chapter ring positions. And what that does, though, is if you look at, look at my little tool here, when I lay that down flat on the desk, if you consider this to be something that's illuminated, I've just hidden probably 40 to 45% of the illumination simply by placing it on the desk. That's what happens when you put them on the chapter ring flat. Vostok-Europe developed this system where the tritium tubes are actually standing up, and they're standing up in these little candle holders that then have reflective material around, that circles around the tritium tube. So that gives you 360-degree illumination. So you get the best possible illumination out of the tritium tubes with the Lunokhod 2 system. Now, another thing that I like to talk about is I've said many, many times, and those of you who've been following me for years know that I have no issue with completely taking apart a Vostok-Europe watch right in front of your eyes. If you came and visited us here in Connecticut, I would take any Vostok-Europe off the shelf. I would take it apart right in front of you if you asked me to, because I have no fear about what you're going to see inside the case, because Vostok-Europe only uses 100% grade A materials. Look at the actual case. This is the one we took apart so I could show you the tritium. And look at the thickness. This is solid metal where I'm showing you here. From one side of the edge of the case to this inside case holder where it is held inside the watch, that is solid stainless steel. So let's see just how thick that is in and of itself. Okay, so we are talking about 6.2 millimeters of stainless steel all the way around the edge of this watch in the case configuration alone. That is not required for this watch to work just fine and to be a very well-made watch. It could have easily have been hollow stainless steel here so that you would have a bridge across one side to the other, and you'd have a ring and then a ring. No, this is solid stainless steel all the way through. If I would challenge you, take apart, don't take apart a watch at home, okay? But if you did, you would see that that is atypical in terms of the level of construction that you get in a Vostok-Europe. I want to show you the case back. Look at the thickness on the case back. Let's see. I think this is like 3 millimeters thick. The case back itself, almost 4. 3.7 millimeters thick on the case back. There you can see the O-ring, which gives you your water resistance. I do like to show the stainless steel version because the black is a little harder to see on the case back. The beautiful etching on the back of the Lunokhod 2 rover. Vostok-Europe does excellent case back work, even though most people will never actually see the case back of the watch and it's something that's only going to be seen by the owner. It does show again that they care about every aspect of the design and styling of the watch, that they put so much effort into the etching on the case back, which I consider to be becoming a lost art. One other element, this is the bar that holds the strap in. Now compare that to your standard spring bar on a watch. This is just off the hook. That's the bar that holds the strap in. And speaking of straps, every Lunokhod 2 does come with 2 straps. It's going to come on leather or silicone, depending upon how it ships. And it is going to have included the alternative to that, either leather or silicone. So you're going to get 2 straps. You're going to get it in the amazing Pelican case from Vostok-Europe. The Pelican case from Vostok-Europe, made in the same facility that Pelican actually makes their own cases. Pelican arguably being the most famous and respected in dive cases. This is a 10 ATM case in and of itself that the watch comes in, which will have the 2 straps, a changing tool, and all the other materials that you need with your Lunokhod 2. The Lunokhod 2 does also include a helium release valve. Now, honestly, most normal people, even divers, are never going to actually need a helium release valve because that is something that's typically used in saturation diving, but it does show how much Vostok-Europe cares about their dive watches being true professional grade dive watches. And one of the things about this, even if you're never going to go 300 meters deep, it does show you that the caliber of construction. In order to pass that test, which by the way, you'll get a form that's printed out from the testing that will actually have the limited edition number of the watch on it to show that it passed the water resistance test before leaving Vilnius to come to you, well, to come to us and then ultimately to you. To be able to achieve 300 meter water resistance, you have to have an extremely well-built watch, which you could see as I walked you through the components of it. So those are 2 of the Lunokhod 2s. I didn't really spend a lot of time here on this one. This is the NH35 automatic mechanical, so that is a true mechanical movement in the NH35 version. So not quite as complex in the dial work, but if you prefer an automatic mechanical timepiece, that's what you're going to get out of the Lunokhod 2 with the NH35, which is the 4208 on here. So there you have it. I'm Craig Hester with R2AWatches.com, and until next time, keep watching.